can share the panel.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
exactly.
Yeah, sometimes you just need to turn it on and it works better. Well, good evening everyone, and welcome to this event at Swissnex. My name is Emilia and I am the CEO of Swissnex in San Francisco. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this event, Fair Play, Human and AI Biases in Gaming. And some of you were here last week. We had a big opening with more than almost 200 people that came here to see the exhibition that we have here that we've been doing with our partner HED. And tonight it's more of an intimate discussion about AI and about the different biases that we have in gaming and in the game industry. I'm happy that we have a lot of people because I know there is Burning Man, so a couple of us decided to stay in a place where the weather is nice. Let me tell you a little bit more about Swissnex. Swissnex in San Francisco drives future-focused global collaboration in science, technology, innovation, and the arts. And we're offering here a unique platform that advance innovation and strive a better world. So that's really our mission statement, and we have different locations all around the world. So we're here in San Francisco. The first Swissnex started 22 years ago in Boston. We're present in Rio in Brazil, in Bangalore, India, in Shanghai, in China, and in Osaka, in Japan. And something very specific about Swissnex is how we work. So last week we had 10 journalists that were here and that really were thinking about the future of the news, the future of society, of democracy. We also work with artists and with the creatives industry. If you're interested in gaming, you'll know that there is GDC here. So we always host the Swiss delegation for the Game Developer Conference. That will be in March. We work with academia, so we have some researchers such as Anthony that you'll hear later. The innovation startup, we'll have a startup bootcamp starting soon, and we have some entrepreneurs that are here in a program with Caspar, the USA accelerator that is here, started from Switzerland. This event is part of a bigger event series called Déjà Vu. Déjà Vu. Our idea here was to put in words the concept that generative AI is something nothing else than some particles that we've seen somewhere, that exist somewhere, that are being put together in different orders. That's how we came up with this idea of déjà vu. How is creativity going to evolve in the future in a world where we use a machine to replicate things? It's a little bit, a reinvention of Walter Benjamin in the 21st century. We've had a couple of events, and I'm happy to see some faces that are coming through the entire series. We had Mainstream Anatomy on journalism, the last original about the creative practices, the exhibition that is going to be in the space until end of November, so feel free to reach out if you want to do a private tour. And today we're going to talk about gaming. And without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce you to our moderator tonight, Tamara Kneese. She's a senior researcher and project director of Data Society Research Institute's AIM, Algorithm Impact Method Lab. Prior to that, she was director of developer engagement on the carbon reduction and green software team in the Software and Advanced Technology Group at Intel, where she researched sustainability strategies and open source developer culture. And she has multiple lives because previously she was an associate professor in the Department of Media Studies and program director of Gender and Sexuality Studies at the University of San Francisco. So Please, let's welcome Tamara. She will be our host for the evening, and I wish you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And now I don't have to give you too much background on my own bio. And so I think thank you, sorry, flickered this. So I am leading right now the Algorithmic Impact Methods Lab at Data and Society Research Institute. And it's a kind of experimental project where we are partnering with developers and deployers in order to engage impacted communities, people who are going to be negatively impacted by AI technologies, and bring those communities into the evaluation process. And so if people are thinking about releasing a new chatbot for healthcare purposes, for example, we are engaging the people who are likely to be end users, and then also thinking about other reverberations that might impact, say, healthcare workers or others who are in that ecosystem. And so my relationship to gaming is also that while I was the director of developer engagement at Intel, I spent a lot of time looking at gaming as a use case, in particular because there were a lot of gamers who I encountered at GDC here in San Francisco who were really passionate about climate change and who were using gaming as a way to increase education around climate catastrophe. And they were also very concerned about the relationship between compute and high energy workloads like streaming and AI and the metaverse and blockchain, particularly NFTs before the merge. And so these were people who were really dedicated to thinking about environmental justice and who were also really concerned about racial inequality in the tech industry as a whole, but then also within the representation in places like the metaverse. And so what I think we should think about in regards to AI in 2024 is how the current hype around AI is connected to these other histories of race, gender, and sexuality and representation, and other forms of media and technology that predate generative AI. So, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, basically, to figure out what harms are associated with generative AI. And we also have to be very clear about how we're using the term AI and in what context. And so often now when we say AI, we think about generative AI, but as we'll talk about tonight, there are many forms of machine learning that are not at all related to ChatGPT. And so how can we be really precise with our language to really pinpoint what the harms and also the potentials for the technology are? Because these are, at the end of the day, tools that different creative workers, like game designers and players, will learn how to navigate on their own. Oh, right, here we go. Okay, so something that we could talk about with respect to generative AI is looking at some of the impacts. Thank you. Okay, now I can see. Thank you. Looking at some of the impacts that have to do with reinforcing stereotypes, as I mentioned, thinking about issues with security and privacy. So another issue that has come up is, are players aware of where the data that comes from their playing sessions, that comes from their interactions with an in-game chatbot, are they aware of where that information is going? Is it being fed to third parties? And this is something that's sort of a general problem with generative AI. And then there's also, in addition to the kind of security and privacy issues, the problem with over-reliance on AI systems and dependency, forms of addiction. And again, this is something that is not unique to either gaming or generative AI, but it is important to think about these things in tandem. And then downstream impacts, like those related to game designers being pressured to use AI in order to further their productivity. So I have a couple of quotes I wanted to read. So I think it's very important to contextualize the current moment with the current labor market within the gaming industry right now. So in an article for Wired, the author and journalist Brian Merchant, who wrote a great book about the Luddites, he talks about the gaming industry right now and how it's being impacted by generative AI. And he says that a recent survey from the organizers of the GDC, the Game Developers Conference, found that 49% of the survey's more than 3,000 respondents said that their workplace used AI, and 4 out of 5 said they had ethical concerns about its use. So this is something that game developers are thinking about, and they're very worried from the perspective of, will it replace them, will it automate their jobs, or will it make their jobs worse? And then another game designer, is quoted by NPR, said, "I feel like we have to turn to a spiritual element here. I want to play games by human beings, not games made by soulless machines." And so I will go to the third slide now. But I also want to point to the idea that AI can be a tool, and while generative AI clearly has a lot of impacts, in part because of the relationship to stolen data, or the environmental impacts of generative AI, which we could also talk about separately, there are ways of using it to critique the status quo and to imagine other futures. And so, just as an example, I pointed to Misha Cardenas' game that uses an AI version of a trans Latinx woman to show how climate change will particularly harm marginalized communities. And in this way, gaming and the use of AI in gaming can be part of training perhaps a younger generation to imagine other worlds. And I'll stop there.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Tamara. So you can go on the slides. Yes, perfect. Nice to meet you. I'm Anthony. I'm the Dean of Research at Geneva University of Art and Design. I'm one of the curators of the show Assembling Intelligence, just nearby. And if you don't know it, my school hosts around 800 students, half art and half design. And there I'm leading a research lab, so I'm managing between 30 to 50 researchers in fields like interior design, graphic design, fashion design, and so on. And our mission is to imagine the future of the creativity in these fields related to ethical issues, sustainability issues, and so on. And what we did is here, so we mix fundamental based research, applied research, or research through art and design. So you have a few examples just here, and we have around 20 research projects right now, funded by public funding or companies. Sarah, please, thank you. And about my work, I want to shape or reshape technologies from other values than only the business one. For example, from the minorities or from the climate crisis and so on. And one example of this is just displayed here. It's the Play to Learn project funded by a Swiss foundation for 2 years, and the goal is to bridge the academic knowledge and the field of video games in order to share the academic knowledge to a broader public, and video games is a very strong medium to do it. So we are working on a huge spectrum coming from TikTok stories to academic papers. So we have no fear to break codes. And last slides, please, Sarah. Yes, thanks. I have a few questions or hypotheses to discuss together with the other guests. So AI in gaming, but for whom? For gamers, the promise is to have a more personalized experience, or to have larger games, for example, such as No Man's Sky, where the game is larger than the planetary system. It's the promise. For game designers, maybe the promise is to work more faster. And for investors, which may be the main actors, the promise is to have a game who costs less, so they can do huge layoffs. Since 2 years, it's a very huge topic in the game industry, as you may know, and also casualization, as Tamara just said. So there are a lot of political dimensions into that topic about gender, race, and class biases. The question of transparency, which is a big problem because most of the AI in the US, as we know today, are commercial and private. We don't have, or only a few, access on the data set, for example, or on the models behind them. And the open source there are very few examples of video games who are open source. So open source games with AI inside, I don't know any example yet. And so we can wonder if AI will increase or reduce diversity. The debate, we can debate about this just after. Thank you. And Ari, I think it's yours.
Great. Can you advance one slide? Thank you. My name is Ari Kalinowski. I run an organization called Delta Arc, which is a gaming and art studio, laboratory, and agency. And by agency, I mean I do a lot of contracting in the space, both for other artists and also within the gaming industry itself. I'm going to kind of give us a whirlwind tour of some of the different AI systems that I've experimented with or worked on for clients. We'll also give our discussion a grounding in contemporary technique. So I don't use machine learning image generation or machine learning model generation that much, but have experimented with it a little bit. In the bottom left, it's a little bit hard to see, but there's a figure, and this character is made with a machine learning algorithm, like its model is, and then I've made an animation in Unreal Engine, and every single frame gets retextured by Stable Diffusion. So I do think that retexturing is a kind of interesting technique, but it's not the mainstay of my practice, but we can talk about it. Like many other developers, I get help with code generation when I need it, and the vast majority of my contract work is actually in like LLMs inside of characters' heads, inside of games that you can talk to, or spaces where characters are continuing to talk and you're in dialogue with them. And so we can label all of this like Gen AI for our purposes. Can we advance? The thing that I'm most passionate about is actually agent-based AI. The boundaries between these things are a little bit fuzzy, but we'll go for this for now. And there are three different categories that people should be aware of. First, AI in games is very old. It's been around since the 70s. It's actually called game AI. So it's what is primarily used for game design. So all the way on the left, we have a system where there's a bunch of agents running around a space, and they're actually building a city in real time. So that's game AI with some procedural generation and with an agent system. Right in the middle, we have reinforcement learning, which is a duplication of that system, but using machine learning. So in the first system, I give the agents all the rules, they follow the rules, they build something. In the second system, I give them a goal, like build a really big tower, and they teach themselves how to build the tower without any input from me. So I just give them the goals. There's no data used by any other people in that second example. They use their own data from their own training to recursively improve themselves over time. In the third example at the bottom, it's a little bit hard to see, but I'll explain it, is what's called a neurosymbolic system. That means you're using machine learning and game AI together. And we're going to see more and more of this over time in practice, both in robotics and in AI and in gaming. In this system, there's an agent inside a game world that takes a picture of what's inside the world. It understands what's in the world. It sends it to an LLM. The LLM writes some rules about what to do based on what it's seen. That goes to the game AI, which executes actions. So again, this agent is running around and building a little web, but it's doing it with a bunch of very complex machine learning systems. It's sort of like a self-driving car, but inside the game engine. I run a lab also for this kind of work at Gray Area Foundation for the Arts. It's called the World Engines Lab. We do a lot of public events on this kind of stuff. Gaming, simulation, history of simulation, AI, how it integrates with game engines. So we have public events that you can drop by and see if you'd like to learn more. Could we do the last slide? One back, thanks. And so that was like agent-based AI. And then another kind of AI that's used quite a bit in contemporary game development is motion capture. So we actually did a performance recently at Track 15, and the dancer, Olesia, is here in the audience. So we did live motion capture, meaning there's a camera, it's capturing all the motion. The motion goes into the game engine in real time, and then I'm doing live cinematography, moving cameras backwards, forwards, and we did the performance for 200 people. So there's lots of this kind of game engine motion capture hybrid practice. In terms of ethics, when I work with these technologies, actually the main thing that doesn't necessarily keep me up at night, but keeps me on my toes and keeps me concerned is addiction more than anything else. So there are all these concerns about data ownership, but people, I would call it like robotic intimacy, and video games where the agents can be personalized to you, learn more about you over time, is a big concern for me. And then 2 dreams for the field that we can talk about when we talk about the future of the industry. One is the game that keeps adapting forever and learns what you love and feeds you more and more of it. There's a lot of papers in this direction, machine learning papers in this direction. And the other dream is the agent that can play anything, meaning it can play any game. It can play Mario, it can play another game, and frighteningly, it can also play the real world, which can also sometimes be a game. So these are some, parts of contemporary practice we can talk about as we move along through these ethics discussions. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Oh. Hello, everyone. It's green. Hello. Oh, you can hear me. Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Mason. I'm the executive director at the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment. We can jump to the next slide. The Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment is a nonprofit that focuses on inspiring digital creators. We do so with 3 classes for ages 8 to 13, that variety of different topics, hopefully AI soon. And we host a variety of different events in our space, but we have a playable history of console gaming going back to 1975 and as recent as games in the 2010s. And we focus on a thing that we call playable preservation. So we make sure that everything that comes into the museum is still going to be able to be used by the people that visit, our patrons and our community. And so I believe we can go to the next slide. So since a lot of people visit, I've already been hearing, this is no, like AI, of course, the words themselves have been around for a while, but the hype is just continues to grow. And game jammers in the space, they decided to make a rule against it. Can't even use AI in the competition because, and it's not even a competition also. It's a game jam is like a hackathon for making games, if you're not familiar. And the group that wanted to host it said, hey, we really don't want to disrespect artists by using generative AI. And that kind of awareness is refreshing, but it's not going to stop the fact that everybody is being pressured to use something like that, and illustrators are already kind of losing ground on what they do. And so the things that I've heard said, this whole thing's in like kind of quotes because I heard these things. So is AI the tool we just have to use now? Because other folks asked, hey, well, I really want to use AI because I'm here at like a hackathon, like a game jam, I want to use it. And I said, okay, as long as you don't use generative AI, you can use large language models. And I was like, oh, well, then that's a little bit of a miss because people want to use the new stuff, but then they're missing the fact that there's writers underneath large language models, and just like there's artists underneath Gen AI. And they're both Gen AI, but I'm specifically talking about like DALL-E and those kind of things. And then we had poets in the space thanks to an event called Beast Crawl that came through, and I was pleasantly surprised by some of the readings because they were talking about the things that I'm thinking about, except for from their perspective, which is something going to be able to like make my art? Does this put my creativity at risk? And so one of them kind of spoke on am I seeing something that was really made by humans? Like, what is the value here with AI art? And then that made me think, what's the value of an AI opponent in a game? Well, you can learn from it. And so there's definitely this temptation to do so. And then if you're playing something like, say, Fortnite, you might go, well, I'm really winning. And then you ask yourself this question, which is, but am I playing just against bots? Like, are these really people? And that's starting to get really tricky even when you're navigating like email. I know Stone Age technology there, but am I reading emails that people wrote? Even if they wrote them and then got them a little fancied up by large language models, it still feels a little bit strange. And definitely that 2 weeks ago or whatever, the mainstream monotony, I wish I had been there because that's exactly, I'm feeling that monotony. Everybody's emails are kind of becoming, till maybe, in a few years we're just letting the emails talk to each other and then hey, update, what happened in those conversations? And so yeah, what does it mean to generate as art as humans, and what does it mean to generate art as AI, right? What does it mean for these things to happen? So we can go next page. And of course we do these free classes and we're out at these different centers, like that's us over at HES-SO Science Center, and I'll admit, I was pressured really quickly. They said, hey, can you write us a little blurb for the moon theme event that you're doing over at HES-SO? And I was like, yeah, cool. Immediately I can curate some games, right? Like we got Lunar Lander, okay, we'll do Star Fox, and then I let some volunteers pick the other ones. And so I said, hey, we're going to be doing these games. Could you help me write a blurb over at Chabot Science Center? Also, do you understand what the mate is? Here's a little blurb about us. And it wrote the little text that's up there. And it's kind of goofy, but it served its total purpose there. And I have this slight shame of being like, oh dang, I let AI out into the world. But then I've also had people go, oh, your little thing that you wrote, it's so cute and clever. And I'm like, oh dang, because I just prompted that. I didn't write it. And they're like, oh no, you prompted it, you're good. But I don't know if I feel that way. And in education, of course, kids are already asking questions of the, oh, can't AI just do this? Like, oh, hey, will you learn a little bit of coding? Or like, hey, you want to come program in Atari Basic like it's 1979? And they're like, oh, I'm really like coding, no. And I have to find some other way to let them know that it's going to be okay, because it's just, words that are magical and it's really fun. And so are we losing that? And if I look at stuff from back then, I kind of feel like we already have lost some of it. Yeah, I can talk more about that. But and then of course, since I'm in a historical context, people already are asking questions like, oh, what was the first AI? And I have to mention, yeah, game AI, it's from the 70s, but first AI papers are from the 50s when we're talking about like barely even having mainframes unless you're involved with the government. So yeah, why the hype now? And what are some key moments so we can stop just looking at the moment of the hype so we can follow AI? What's the story it's going to tell, and what's next? Oh, and right behind Tamara is this awesome part of a Mario game where you're running towards the goalpost and it just gets wings and it runs away from you and you're like, whoa! And I think a lot of these hype cycles, a lot of these technologies are all about that, right? You're like, oh yeah, AI's here, and it runs away. Because yeah, VR, it's here, it runs away. How will we chase it effectively?
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning the history aspect of this, which of course the MAID would do automatically because it's so wonderful and it really is a place to experience in a very embodied and material way previous histories of gaming, and through that also the history of tech and history of computing. And if you haven't been there, I do recommend checking it out. I brought my 5-year-old son and we were able to play a little bit of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Super Nintendo?
On
the NES?
Yeah, Sega actually.
Oh, Sega, okay.
Yeah.
They made it on everything.
They made it on everything. And so it's just a really delightful experience to like have that really physical relationship to play and to gaming and to having that be like an intergenerational moment as well. And so that's sort of what I wanted to open with, is a question about educating not just future generations, and Anthony, I know a lot of your work is very directly related to trying to do outreach to Gen Z, but Ari, I think like your work as well is about education of the public and working on things in a very collective sense, and I think that public programming, in the same way that at Tech Workers Coalition we do teach-ins, and we do learning clubs, and we have ways of kind of working on problems together, and so much of it is about situating the current problems that face us with technology and outside of it in previous histories, and how can we use both gaming and its relationship to AI to make history a little bit more palpable to others.
So definitely there's this important space for gaming in education already. If you think that people aren't learning things by playing games, you are mistaken. And so I think it's very important that we can try and kind of connect these dots there. I think you would have a lot to say about that, but in particular, sorry, I actually will pass it to you, Anthony, on talking about.
I think we should not separate the history of AI to the whole history of computing, the so-called field of digital studies, for example, but also the political studies, the history of finance, because everything is linked, and history of gaming is not separate from the history of the games, for example, board games, or today maybe escape games, but I think we should to repolitize in a way this history. Because it's not only a story about games, hardware, machines, such as we can see in the wonderful Computer History Museum in Palo Alto. Yeah?
Mountain View.
Yes, thank you. But we also need the history of from other continents, other countries, also the history through the point of view of the minorities. So we need several histories and not only the mainstream histories of the people who succeed from the garbage, the garage, to the big tech. So it's, okay, that history is important, but it's only one history and not the only one.
Yeah, I think that's actually almost an issue that's already like alive at any museum you go to, is you're getting this one story from this one direction. And I think asking folks to kind of make these connections to the bigger picture, and that happens somewhat organically at the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, just because the most popular exhibits are not, unfortunately, somewhat unfortunately, not the ones that we put a lot of interpretations and work into, like curating pieces. It's our all playable floor because people want to share their history and what was important to them there. And I think that as these tools become more important, it's gonna the way that the technology crosses over is just, it gets really blurred. And so being able to see a certain point in time that someone else shared and be able to hear that information from like your parent or something that's sharing a game or your friend, that's going to be what helps open up that bigger picture.
I think that the context for me to best answer this is through what happens at Gray Area Foundation, which is that we do have a lot of people. We have a program, might be renamed soon, called the Immersive, which is an education program that flows into an artist in residence program, which is almost like the intermediate program that flows into a lab program. So there's almost like this beginner, intermediate, advanced kind of structure of education at Gray Area. And we definitely have a cohort or a contingent of people who are working on game engines within that track. And I think you can't work, in game engines right now, especially not in this city, without feeling the collision of the old paradigm of game AI and symbolic programming coming into really ferocious contact with machine learning methods. And you have kind of people who sit in different parts of this camp, people who want to mix these things together, people who want to throw away all the kind of old ways, and people who are much more conservative, and everybody has a very strong point, but you sort of feel the history as you begin to program with these different sort of threads around you. I think, personally as a game developer, there was a paper released, I think yesterday, called Game Engine, where a diffusion model was able to like fully reproduce Doom, like almost by itself. Like we're running a video game, we're running an interactive game inside of like a neural engine, not inside of like an old game engine. So I think we're in this moment where we are sort of feeling history a little bit as it happens, and nobody has really sort of won out yet in terms of how people are building systems. So the history is kind of, it's really in your face if you're sort of developing in this space.
That makes me think of will building these complex systems of game AI become kind of like the cursive of the industry? Like you don't have to use it anymore unless you really want to, and otherwise you're just getting this kind of thing from, from the existing systems and engines.
But there's something so beautiful about how you just put that, especially with the very deeply embodied aspect of, you can feel history, and it is really a tactile thing. And that gets me to my next question, so I spend all day thinking about the harms of AI. That's like all I do. That is my job, and telling people about it. But if we're thinking about the potential for enhancing human creativity or the relationship between technology and human creativity, which of course we all believe in, so what are some of the projects within the gaming and design world that you've seen that are most transgressive or politically salient? Are there things that you've seen, projects that you've seen that are just really taking it to the next level? Like, yeah.
Yeah, maybe one of the challenges of AI is that it blurbs or it challenged the boundaries of the old media. But what was also the case of the computer, because on the computer you can represent a photo, a music, and so on, but at the end it's code. With AI you can mix everything, and I think the main challenge is to invent a new medium rather than reproducing all mediums, which is a huge task. But if we think about the long history of the photography field, when the photography appears, a lot of days ago, it mimics the painting. And the photography became an art at the time when the medium didn't mimic the painting anymore. So, and we are right now, for now, okay, we could, it can replace artists because it can mimic a painting, but art it's not this. Art it's about inventing a new medium, a new way, not to reproduce, but things that we never saw in the past. So, what kind of example? I don't know, but here at the exhibition there is one work, I think fascinating, between cinema and video games. So you can play a game and at the same time it analyzes the picture in real time of your play, and it's crawled within a corpus of movies. So it's a kind of installation between two mediums, and the next step will be what's the interplay or the relationship between these two mediums. So that will be the main challenge, I think.
I'm struggling to answer this because I feel like the most transgressive things that are happening in science and engineering, and not, I mean, and happening maybe in a different way in art. Like in art, they're happening on the layer of content, and engineering, it feels like they're happening on the layer of what is possible. I think that I look at a lot of audio visual motion capture arts practice that I think is very beautiful, stunning, and transgressive, particularly in its portrayal of identity as like masculine slides into feminine, into alien, into something else. Like I think that those are very powerful. Like I think motion capture is definitely having like a very powerful artistic moment. So I maybe put that over here. And then on the other side, looking at what agents are capable of doing in the scientific and engineering context on a month-to-month basis is both like awe-inspiring and frightening and like somewhat kind of existential, because it just seems like the march of reproducing human cognition in the march of like abstracting away human cognition and mechanizing it is just moving along. And you can see that in robotic research in a way that you can't help but feel very emotional about it. I'm really into it, and I also feel pretty emotional about it.
Some of the most interesting projects I've seen, computer vision is also like really amazing. I feel like you were touching really on something that I've seen also blossom in art. There's like people that do the flow arts that are using computer vision to then also augment it, so add lights and stuff, and that's really spoke to me too. But the project I saw was making agents. I am a hobby game dev as well, and I saw someone make agents in like a mock-up studio, because you can ask a large language model, hey, will you make me tic-tac-toe? And it will, in whatever language you want, except for Atari Basic. It's really bad at Atari Basic. I tried. I have to write my own tic-tac-toe in that scenario because there's not enough data out there. Luckily I have the book. But this system, it was inside a game engine, I believe it was just Unity, and they made it so that each little character could walk around and shoot out to ChatGPT and come up with its ideas about its role in the game studio. And they would talk to each other and exchange data, so they would produce games. And of course, as they added more roles and more agents, the games got better, but of course there's still like, there's a maximum yield there. But it was something of like looking at this crazy ant farm. And I love tycoon and simulator games, right? And this was like a whole nother approach to that. And it was exciting and just kind of gross, because I'm seeing these little, mindless people try to do this thing that is really amazing to me. But at the same time, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And it made me kind of stop feeling so bad about, like, I'm like, oh man, I could take a bunch of shortcuts by using this, and what's the product gonna look like? And I saw a bunch of the products from the outcome of this like agent studio, and I thought, well, that's something, and it's definitely something that can be taught on. If someone really doesn't know, like, oh, what's the easiest game I can program? It's probably like pump the balloon until it pops. So really easy to do, but you could get that re-explained to you in as many times as you need with a chat agent, where myself as a tutor or teacher might lose patience, and so there's just something really cool there that is also just like kind of really upsetting, but I can't wait to see what it continues to do.
It can become boring very quick. If we take Steam, the main gaming platform distribution, that's where a lot of games are generated, and it's a big challenge because just before we have the whole mobile gaming industry, as Ari said, who flowed also maybe 100, 1,000 games per day, maybe a lot more, I don't know. And now it's become worse and worse, but at the end, it's quite the same game. So you can reproduce every game, but we need more style, more diversity, and if it's to have more monotony, what's the point? So we have one of the most striking innovation in the world, just to reproduce very old things. So there is a huge paradox in this.
What you said made me think about something I talk about all the time. We have a little small exhibit that's on battery power that has the game Balloon Fight in it, which is made by Iwata, who was the president of Nintendo at one point, and it has this mini game in it called Balloon Trip that's just like Angry Bird, and it just speaks to the medium's the message. It doesn't matter that we have a supercomputer in our hand. We just want to tap and play, Flappy Bird, or slide and shoot and play Angry Bird. But both of those games, Flappy Bird and Angry Bird, you probably saw them a million times as web games or games of another sort. Those discs for Windows, like 100 games on there. You probably played some Slingshot game, and Balloon Trip, that's 1986 and earlier on Famicom. And yeah, so we're seeing the same thing. So what's going to make it meaningful? And I think that's the medium. So if we're going to use this weird medium to make things, it also needs to be meaningful and not just like a way to produce things fast.
Yeah, maybe a way could be remixing several games together, for example, mixing Doom and Mario. AI has a huge potential for this because, and also it challenged the copyrights also because obviously it's the same company, it's not open source at all. So if you begin to remix that kind of huge popular games and selling the results, yes, that's good work for lawyers.
That speaks so loudly to what you already see if you go on like itch.io and look at what fan games are. I bet you could find like Mario Doom and Doom Mario, where you're like Doom guy jumping around shooting Koopas, and the opposite where like the Goombas are the Nazis or whatever. Or the demons, excuse me. Not Wolfenstein, it's Doom.
So I'm thinking that we should probably open it up to the audience for questions. I have a few more in my back pocket, including one on open source. But yeah, does anyone in the audience have a question?
Speechless.
Hey y'all. Nice to meet you. We spoke just a second ago about. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I'm there.
It's both beautiful and kind of it's emotional. It's scary seeing that we have this incredible technology that's blooming almost outside of our control, and it's replacing such a creative act. It's replacing art. It's replacing a piece of our own creativities. The beautiful aspect on the other side is how much leverage I think it gives us over what we can create. I'm a huge believer in some people can have 10x or 100x their own capabilities. They just find the right tool, the right moment in time, the right group of people to accomplish something with. And something I really value about this technology is that we might be able to distribute this kind of leverage to so many different people. And I'm wondering, when it comes to this sort of fear response, because I have it too, right? Like, I really value being creative when I have the opportunities to do so. When it comes to this fear response, I wonder if there's an opportunity there for us to adapt. Now, I wonder what adaptation looks like.
I think the way to adapt is to educate, right? we all use the word AI because it's kind of like the word we're using, but if we do what Ari said and focus on what we're actually talking about, we're going to become much more knowledgeable, right? There's the psychological study and like language study of over history of color, right? And colors emerge, right? We're all just kind of calling this purple thing blue because it's easier. And as they become more separate, I think that's going to take away the fear, because we're looking at this blob, right? And we're calling it the wrong name. And so of course we're kind of getting afraid of it. And it seems like it's ballooning out of our control because the majority of us don't have control. It's these holders of these large data sets and these players that we do have an influence on, and that fear goes way outside of just technology alone. So hope that answers.
Yeah, I think controlling is maybe almost useless because it's impossible. So it's more important to explore rather than want to control. I think the true question is, are we able to explore? Because most of the AI systems are private, and it's also expensive to use. So for a lot of people, it's difficult to explore, and that's why we need more open system, open platforms, driven by communities. So to have AI in a way grounded, and there is also, as Tamara study the point of the data workers, because it's not a magic, it's not on the cloud. At the end, it's people, less and less paid. So we need more critical questions and studies in order to be able to explore, because for now it's like a black box, and it's difficult to explore a black box. So
I think the story of the Mechanical Turk is particularly poignant here, because there was this amazing machine that went around, and it was this chess that could play itself, and you're like, whoa, this mechanism's incredible, but it was really just a person hiding away behind a trapdoor thing, so that even people that looked in it, they're like, oh, whoa, it really is empty, it's really just this mechanism. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, that's what Amazon calls their big personal, if you're trying to get a bunch of data, it's called Mechanical Turk, and that's really cool, but it also just kind of speaks to the black box, what's inside of it. It's people, it's on the screen, so it's people's work.
I think I have a bunch of hopes and fears that are really pointed that might be helpful. So like motion capture, there's a lot of hope for it and its use. It's enabled so much great practice. I'm aware that it is probably fundamentally a military technology, and I'm aware of its military deployment, and that doesn't escape my mind while I create with it, because a lot of artistic technologies in the new media space share that origination, which makes you think back to like, where does our fundamental funding go? Is there another way of funding these kinds of things? For agent AI, it's sort of similar. I do like a fair bit of tracking of military robotics, and you see like game engines, simulations, military, self-driving, and then like casual games. And it's all in a kind of weird continuum where everything is sort of talking to everything else, right? And in that case, for agent AI, it's really a question of deployment. I do think that agent AI inside of game worlds or for arts practice is like so many potentials that haven't really been used yet, and is very, very empowering. And then for generative AI, I'm not really touched by the a machine is doing what a human can do. I don't really care that much. I would just like artists to get paid. And I would prefer machines to be working in the mines rather than making art, so humans would have to work in the mines. But this is the world we're in because it's easier to get data off the internet than it is to get data from inside the mines. So, the power asymmetry between artists and the makers of these technologies does sit very weirdly with me as an artistic practitioner. So I am in this bizarre space of working in gaming, using these technologies, being really excited about them, but also feeling all these like intense paradoxes and contradictions. But that's like our contemporary moment with this stuff, I think.
I wanted to actually.
Thank you.
I want to actually follow up because you were talking about addiction, and I think that goes really in thread with this. Like, it's an empowering tool, but even using the tool can be addictive. But then reinforcement learning can get crazy. And you said you wanted to speak on it, and I wanted to hear. So,
and we are at this strange moment in San Francisco at the core of the AI, the big tech, and also the core of the counterculture, LGBT, hackerspaces, and so on. But it looks like two worlds, and there is only a few bridges between them. So it's a very strange moment right now, I think.
Just briefly about the addiction thing, it's funny because I'm working with a gaming company and we have to design our characters to not be too charming. There's like a charming, charming stuff.
The computer vision for charming is saying you're off the charming charts.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Get back down there.
And also that's us. There's probably like 50 other companies that are making even more, like a charming village where everybody's super nice to you and they're so excited to see you. Like that could really suck certain people in. So that's, I feel pretty good about what we're making, but I know that there's going to be a lot of people taking this idea and running with it in a way that's like pretty.
For everything you don't do, someone else is doing it, and that's like, what did you that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That segues very well into my question actually. Thank you for having such a wonderful session. My question is, as a creator, as a developer, you are accountable to different types of stakeholders. At that point, are you true to your art? Are you true to your creativity in gaming or in the thing that you are creating? Or are you, what do you do if you, what do you do? Would you be true to your art, or would you pay more attention to the business side of it without pissing any side off?
This is such a, hits home for me because while growing up, was like, I want to do video game stuff, and everybody'd be like, oh no, you're good with computers, keep going to computers. And so I kind of Trojan horsed myself into what I want to do by saying, yes, computers, I'll be a game programmer. But then I didn't, don't say that, because they're like, oh no, you need to do websites and stuff, and I've done that stuff. But, so how do you stay true to your art? Well, I think everybody's gonna have a different approach. Some folks will go to the mines, so to speak, to make the money to then build themselves their runway or get their escape. And others will stay true to themselves and not work for these companies. And both will have a rough time. But as the optimist, both will have their light at the end of the tunnel, right? The other one is that they're like, I have never been under the dark cloud, right? And that's a great way to live. And then the other, more similar to my story, is I see a runway that I can build my next plane and take it off till it crashes again. And I will have expressed myself beautifully during that time and try to be true to myself while I'm, working the machine. Now I'm in nonprofit, so hey, I get a little bit of joy at least from the nonprofit sector while I'm trying to think of my next big fun puzzle game or whatever.
This is a tricky question. So I work in the public school in Switzerland, so I'm lucky to got public funding, so I don't have any stakeholders also. But
people.
It's different in the US.
public.
I know, and there is no tuition fees also for the students, so which is weird. Yeah. It's their political choices, but maybe we need more business models in the gaming industry. For example, crowdfunding could be one. It could be funded by the community, not by an investor. It could be also open source, and you can have donations such as Wikipedia, or you can have smaller teams, so you need to escape from the rat race of the photorealistic games who cost millions and millions. You can create such beautiful games with a small budget, so we need more diversity also on the business models. And I think it's possible to escape of, the blockbusters of the gaming industry.
You were actually already talking about this with, oh gosh, I'm not going to buy a really nice painter because I am a photographer, so sorry painters. And then they were like, well, what am I going to do next? And they came up with the coolest stuff. And another one is the steam engine. That made people get much better at sailing, much better. And so, whatever the AI does, we're just going to hopefully do better.
I think also in contemporary practice in game studios, for 95% of the cases, Gen AI in particular is only used for storyboarding or for rough drafts. Like nobody goes text to model to game because the quality is not high enough yet. And so there's this first part that's automated, and then the second part where everything happens by hand. I don't know, again, for me, whether by hand or by automation, I don't really think in these terms, but if you consider that to be true to yourself, right now we're at a kind of 50-50 split, and I guess it remains to be seen what happens next.
Yeah, also, sorry, I want to just to go on. A big problem in the gaming industry is the distribution system, such as Steam, who cut 30% of the sales. And I know there are a lot of problems with technologies, but maybe in the future with blockchain, you can cut a lot of taxes and to have a more horizontal and distributive system, even if there are a lot of scams and problems with technologies. But still, the promise, I think, are good.
Thank you so much.
I guess my question, I'm hearing two things. So we kind of have this history of maybe capture of things like data, and then gaming worlds and places like Minecraft are really powerful expressions where people can create new rules, practice new ways of being, and kind of share values. So I guess maybe what's a future you imagine where we kind of have been able to address like fair play and AI biases, and like what would we need to get there? You mentioned certain things like funding, like what else would we need to get there?
I think Tamara will agree that you need lots of time and lots of policy and to build
Regulation is a huge one. Without regulation, nothing will get better.
Teaching?
And collective action.
Collective action. Yeah.
Teaching, I would say teaching about games, but teaching with games also.
Yeah.
That's the goal of project I'm doing with Tiberi. Just here, Play to Learn is to address or sharing knowledge with video games, and at the same time you can also talk about the history of the game. So I think it's the good medium not only for teenagers but also for adults.
I believe it's also going to need, data control, which is something that before even the AI concept we really need to have, because if you want especially children or youth to be in these kind of worlds, which I'd love to see that, but of course there's just so much work to do to get to there. And so now we've had all the time and stuff and we've made these policies, underneath it all we're going to have exactly what Anthony was talking about, some technology like cryptography that can make you really in control of your own data and interactions, so that the larger system isn't kind of like there to be the person in the middle. I personally hate the fact that whenever I'm using a messenger, there's always someone in the middle, if not two people in the middle, because there's the internet connection itself, right, or the landline if you're still doing that, and then, oh, well, now I'm on Messenger, and so Facebook's the person in the middle and Comcast, and why do I need all these folks to speak to each other when it's just not, there's got to be a solution. Everybody can see my data all along the way, so.
I would also add to the mix the need for content moderation, particularly at scale, and it's a really hard problem, which is why nobody likes to do it. But that's another way of making sure that gaming platforms and worlds are more accessible to different kinds of people. And I would also argue that you need to fundamentally change, obviously the funding structure, but also the problem of data ownership and platform governance. So who is really managing the contours of the game, and who is able to, if you're going to put a lot of time as a player into producing an object in a game, and then that game disappears or fundamentally changes, then you lose control over this thing that you created, maybe collectively. And so having a different way of dealing with that is also going to be very important.
I was on the Reddit for platform cooperativism this morning, and the first post is like, where do y'all go? Because people were talking about platform ownership pretty extensively in 2015, 2016, 2017, and then that conversation just completely fell off the map, and we haven't heard anything about it since. I think Minecraft is an amazing, like, little world to talk about our bigger world. There's a whole group of people who have reverse engineered all of Minecraft and made all of the code open source. And then there's a lot of communities that self-govern their own servers. There's like all sorts of worlds that are spun up. There's a lot of AI experimentation in Minecraft, both game AI. So there are worlds with game AI where that's kind of made just by players around in the system, and humans have to figure out how to like interact with these bots, and it almost like prefigures possibly like maybe the next 5, 10, 15 years of robotics and me interacting with my pizza delivering robot to a certain extent. There's also people who are doing actually the most cutting edge agent-based game work in the world happens in Minecraft, more than any other simulator. And some of those projects, like MineRL, are open source. So again, if you want to experience like the most cutting edge intelligence that the world, synthetic intelligence that the world has to offer, you can just sign in on Minecraft. So it's a really good little micro world to talk about these things, but without the larger structures that everybody else on the panel has mentioned, it's pretty much for naught.
And to jump on what you said about Minecraft, there is a French artist called Thibaut Brunet who is doing scientific exploration embedded into Minecraft. So invited physicians, biologists, and so on to study things they cannot do because it costs too much money to travel in the world, but embedded into Minecraft. So it takes him a lot of time to set up the board, but it can also be seen as a scientific platform.
And we've been mentioning it a few times. What's the place in digital entertainment or in every games in education? Well, Minecraft's a wonderful example because people are learning circuitry just by playing Threadstone. So maybe the next Minecraft update that I'd love to see is some neural network tools to kind of visualize that in some way. But that's a little bit more difficult, but it's not impossible. So I would love to see that.
One last thing, sorry, we're on my like subject, great intensity or my hyperfocus or whatever. There is a server in Minecraft called 2B2T, which is one of the most famous Minecraft servers of all time, and it has the most insane history of like hackings, coups, like democratic repossession of an oligarchic government, like release of bots with like really terrible conditions for the world, environmental management. I mean, just the Wikipedia for 2B2T is like an astonishing novel, so I recommend checking that out.
First of all, thank you for such an engaging conversation today. It's really intellectually stimulating. My question is more towards like whenever a new media technology or new media comes along, you require a lot of experimentation and exploration to find out exactly where it can be used, right? So my question is for all four of you in all different directions that you're working. I want to understand what is your process or what's your experimentation and exploration methodologies and how you're going about it in each of your different fields, like from policy and regulation towards education and research, how you're exploring in technology and you're looking at creating games, and for you in museum as to how it is getting in a way towards people, how they would experience.
So just like day to day at the museum, how it's kind of like already being integrated, where it's kind of going, it's like computer vision, immediately, I have a big box of CDs. If the text is clear or legible enough, I can use computer vision to grab the text off of things. This is incredibly useful for donation intake, and it's awesome. And just like I was mentioning at the Game Jam, people want to use these tools to speed up. If you only have 12 hours to make a game, well, whatever tool can get me running, I want to use, if I'm allowed. And then also there's just like this desire to experiment, which I'm sure at Gray Area is really big too. And so folks were like, I know we're not doing the Gen AI, but let's use the large language model so that I can make a agent in this game that can talk back to them. It was a spaceship that was like learn stuff about you and then would crash down and then talk back. And so I I think the museum's approaching it kind of from the community side, mainly because also even that collection work I was talking about is done by volunteers, and so if somebody wants to try something, we'll see where it goes, and if it produces what we need, that's awesome, but we have to think at every step, is this causing harm? Because if it is, then we really have no place doing it as as a service to our community.
At my school, we have an area action plan since 2 years, but it covers a lot of scale coming from research projects from the teaching staff, but also a new weekly courses about AI, 3 hours and a half per week. And we try to document it and write everything we do, and we release on open source. Here at the exhibition, you can find a pedagogical guide about AI that anyone can redo at their school, because telling teachers to teach AI is difficult because they don't know how to start. So we try to not only teach, but to build tools to help other schools or teachers or companies also to do things by themselves. So I think a combination of teaching and open source could be a good way to start.
Sure. So from the non-developer perspective, from more of a policy and research lens, I would say that I have a background in critical media studies, media theory, ethnography, and while there are many good critiques of the tech industry from that perspective, I also took a job at Intel in part because I think it's very important to understand how power works within organizations. And so what I've seen from a policy world lens is that often when we talk about things like algorithmic impact assessments and the need for stakeholder participation and engagement, so the idea that we should be engaging marginalized communities before products are deployed, I think that sounds really great on a theoretical level, but it doesn't necessarily work in practice. If the people who are doing responsible AI work, if the people who are doing compliance work within tech companies and real research within companies are not given any power. And so understanding how there has to be a combination of regulation, external pressure, and collective action, and then you need people on the inside who can make shit happen. And so what the experiment really is at Game Lab is a way of bringing together all of those forces and trying to figure out, through kind of a process of trial and error, what we can do to make sure that there's more space for abolition. So how do we give communities the right to contest technologies that do not serve them and have a moment to actually push back?
It's funny because you ask for more regulation, and in Europe we ask for less regulation. in some context. We have the RGPD, European AI Act, and
So at the lab, I guess at the lab in that gray area, we do a couple different things. So one thing we do is a paper reading group. The paper reading group is pretty open. So we get a lot of people from adjacent fields coming in, not knowing that much when they start, and like in a year they're able to kind of like break down a paper, and that takes care of your kind of forecasting angle, so you see what's like coming at you 6 months, 1 year, in the future. Then there are some artist researchers in the lab who do implementation, so they'll take a system and put it inside of an art piece. So they'll either do a demo, and they'll present the demo. We have a simulation session that happens once a month, and a lot of these researchers present their demos at that moment. And the whole community can kind of like look at what's being implemented, both on an artistic and on an engineering level. And then we do performances. I mentioned this motion capture performance that was done at Shack 15 a couple days ago. And what's nice about the performance context is that it goes out to the general public, and then there is often a moment afterwards where people are like, how did you do that? And then you get to kind of engage with people no matter what their background is. So I think this is a thing that Gray Area has traditionally been kind of good at, which is taking technical systems, opening them up for designers, artists, and audiences to sort of walk around inside them and get to know them at different levels, like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I think the MAID also does that, and that's why it's really important to have these like public institutions that allow these technologies to be more open and for people to engage in them, not just as like pure consumption.
Thanks everyone. I just have a question, and I've been trying, we've touched upon this a little bit, but speaking about the AI biases, I was at a talk where a woman was telling about building a tool that would predict how successful a startup would be. And what she found out very quickly is that it's pretty heavily biased towards being white men and having graduated from a certain college, things like that. So the solution to it, at least one she's exploring, is building a synthetic data set, right, where it opens it up to women of different, different backgrounds, different. So is this applicable? Like, are there like good games or like good engines or good methods that we can kind of like feed into the AI to like, teach us to do things better? Is this, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
I think you're like kind of speaking to like data sets and their inherent biases, because like, we look at a world full of biases and we grab data from it, it's going to have all of those biases, right? And very much so at surface level. And that's not so good. And so this idea of synthetic data is really good, but we might need a synthetic world where everything's, topsy-turvy to kind of express that kind of parity. But I think just showing those patterns and visualizing them will make people learn something, which is that that's just not true. That's just how that's the system, that's the patriarchy, right? And so that data being exposed and then kind of, the parity, the thing that the researcher was doing, I think is a really great idea, because if you make this synthetic data set that shows, hey, if I have this many data points and I say that they're all, self-taught women or people of color or something, and then suddenly, that's the success rate goes up. You kind of see behind the curtain and you go, oh, well, this is just a weighted graph. What's going on here? It's just a bunch of weighted graphs next to each other that are saying, at the end of the day, this is the truth. But it's not, it's very subjective. So, are there existing good tools? I would say start finding all of the data that you can that speaks against that wave, but you'll still be a salmon going against the current, I think.
There are a few open source datasets where the biases are less violent, but for private models it's difficult, you cannot inspect them. But some months ago, some researchers found some, for example, pedopornographic pictures into commercial datasets, and after they, try to fix it, but it's very difficult to know it. So that's why researchers are precious, obviously, and but it's also a matter of what you want to do with the dataset, because if you use an open dataset, fair dataset to track people or to blame them or to discriminate them, okay, so it's always a combination of the sources, that's why open source is important, but also a question of regulation and goals in a way.
And like ethics, because like San Jose is implementing, I just learned about this, but they're considering, and now they kind of like took another angle, but they were considering checking to see if people were living in their vehicles using computer vision. And is that ethical? Is that something that community wants to do? I think it's...
That's one of the projects that we worked on in lab. We fought that hard.
So then you might know the follow-up, I forgot it, but I figured when I heard it, I was like, oh, well, that's backwards. It was something about, I think it's the opposite. It's like finding landlords, right?
Yes, so they've pivoted, so the city of San Jose has pivoted from,
abusive landlords.
unhoused people through computer vision technology because they were targeting lived-in vehicles. And now they've pivoted to using AI instead to detect landlords that are more likely to evict people. And so,
Just a side note, I also want to talk about the risk of customization, so fake inclusivity, because if you take a plane, for example, you can see movies on the plane, but the movies are not the same than the one in cinema because of the censorship. It depends on the companies. And with AI, you are able right now to customize your own experience for movies, gaming, and so on. So you can have more women, but also less women, people of color, and so on. So at the end, it's a lack of the common sense in a way. And you can have more diversity, but also less. And at the end, nobody will play the same game or will see the same movies. So it's a tricky question.
I think a lot of science fiction talks about this like shared experience we'll have in like new media, and it's almost like we're approaching the exact opposite. You'll have exactly the experience that it wants you to have, and you know, ideology is already this vessel, right? One of us watches a movie, and another one watches a movie, and if we're on the other sides of the fence, and we both love the movie, if we try to explain it in some ideological way, we're probably going to somehow use the empty glass to justify our thoughts and our ideas on the other end, and so there's, yeah, these like hyper customized experiences might be bad for everything, like especially diversity.
For collectivity.
Even though they're trying to, even though they're trying to be like, look, everybody's invited. Then we already see this in social media all the time. Your thread is your thread, and I want to go watch the news. Well, are you watching the left channel or the right channel? What are you watching, right? So.
Thank you very much. I think we're approaching the end of the panel, so please join me in giving a last applause to the panel. Thank you very much. It was great for me to hear all of those ideas, and also have a background in policy, so I also think most of the time regulation first, but I had this kind of discussion where it's like, we're kind of the makerspace mindset. We're like, look, we could do that, change the financing model, you know, decentralize more and think about new technologies. So thank you for all those inspiring ideas. And I invite you all now, if you want to come back to some of the upcoming events that we have, there will be a pitch night. We'll have about 10 startups from Switzerland, deep tech AI, that are going to pitch. It's going to be the 12th of September, I believe, and otherwise, if you want to continue to come to our event, meeting researchers, discussing about the future, discussing about our world, if you yourself have ideas, feel free to come and talk to us. I invite you now to continue the apéro. There's still some food, some drinks, and I hope to see you soon again. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Yes, thank you. For some moderation. No, really.
That was good. That was good. Now I get wine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It's a really great discussion. Thank you.
C'est mon dernier jour ici, c'est si triste. Les derniers jours de cette session, pas de ma vie.
So meet tomorrow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amazing talk, thank you. Merci à toi, grâce à toi. Tu peux être fier. On avait une modératrice top level qui est pas restée neutre, ça fait du bien. Yes.
Oh, you did it tonight.